then getting into our capital program and a bunch of program elements for us.
And so before we begin this meeting, I'd like to call the meeting to order. I just want to make sure we're following the agenda. Ms. Quirk, are there any public communications item on the posted items?
No, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so just want to note for the record, we have Trustee Solis and Trustee Arancibia here at the Facilities Subcommittee. Thank you so much there's a lot of information to cover, and I think we're trying to just kind of get ahead of the agenda, but I want to make sure we're following. Okay, so that addresses the public communication on posted items. Now, as you can see in the agenda, we have the following items. We have items for discussion. Number 1, general updates. Number 2, program updates. Number 3, project updates. And number 4, roundtable, before we get to D and adjournment. So with that, if the trustees are so amenable, I will ask Ms. Quirk to get into the presentation of the information. Is that appropriate?
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you, trustees. So with that, Ms. Quirk, you're on.
Here you were all trying to be informal and positive, you know, and then
Right? Look at that go.
He just came in and
We
boarded.
got this part. This part. We're ready to go now, though. Okay, thank you for that. So, welcome. Staff, some of us are sitting here. I just wanted to give you a vision of the division staff for facilities and also for our maintenance staff. They're reflected on the right. But here present with us today, I do want to take a moment to introduce faces that you may not know, and they're folks that do the hard work that's out there in front of us. So right here to my left is our new director for planning construction, Doctor, I made you a doctor, Jason Bruss. I'm never going to live that one down. Over here to my far left, though, is equally important, is Ms. Yoli Hernandez. She's our assistant in the office, and she makes our world go round. And then all the way on the far side over there is Aiden Hamamlo. He's our contracts manager. But in terms of our boots on the ground, we have Jeanette Catan. She's our new project manager and an architect who joined us recently. And we have Mr. Armando Murillo, who you know well for the work that he has done for us to date. Missing from us is Janice Alcarez. She is with family in the Philippines at this time.
So the only person I really don't know is Mr. Hamlo and Ms. Gaitan. Is that correct? Okay, those are the two new people.
Yes.
That we got.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start high level with maintenance. I just wanted to give you a quick update on the things that they've done. So these boxes reflect general work that they have accomplished over this year between general maintenance, district-wide athletics. I'm not going to go through detail. You can reference those on your own. And then the trainings and compliance requirements that they continue to meet for us. And then moving forward, this year they have spent a significant amount of time getting organized for annual contracts. And so each of these boxes up here reflect the annual contracts that they have been putting in place. You've been approving them the last few board meetings. There's a few more coming for the work that they will be largely doing as we move through next school year. And many of these are 2-year contracts. But it's just to help the general maintenance work that's out there for us. We wanted to do a quick highlight of successes. There are projects up here that you know well that we have completed successfully in this last year. I do want to say that personally for me, some of this is really exciting, and I think for Dr. Gary as well. When we look at Benitez Stadium, Hilltop Middle School Science Building, the Mar Vista Aquatics, and Sweetwater's concession stands, I've been here for 8 years this summer. Those were projects that were in place before we got here, and we finally, through all the challenges that we've had, been in a position to close those projects. And we're going to be moving forward with a whole new capital program. So it's a victory in itself, and it's been a lot of hard work and a push for some of the folks sitting here at the table to make that happen. And then we also wanted to touch base, and I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Bruss so he can walk you through a couple of slides of things that we continue to experience while we are navigating our capital program.
Thank you, Ms. Quirk. So as I think everyone knows, there's been a multitude of challenges throughout society over the past few years, and the construction industry has not been immune from those challenges. So this slide that we are viewing here illustrates just a high-level view of some of those challenges, things like the costs and just the price of materials, escalation, some of the delays also, some of the challenges in construction market, the fact that there is less labor out there and less readily available and qualified labor. So the timing of projects and when projects are bid, when they're put out to the market is critical. And those are things that we're looking at on a daily basis. We also run into some of the manufacturing challenges. We just had some conversations today about long lead times of electrical components, for example. Some of the switchgear, wiring, of course, anything with a microchip is still has delays associated with it. And then there's also code changes that happen. So we just entered a triennial new code implementation at the beginning of this calendar year. So there are things like new requirements for PV, photovoltaic panels, solar panels, battery storage, and just general code updates that have to be included within our design. So we take those into account. This next slide takes a look at some of the project costs in comparison between two similar projects. The one on the left is the Bonita Vista High School Stadium project. And it's shown with the blue bar being the construction cost, the orange bar being the total project cost, and that's in millions of dollars there. So Bonita Vista High School was bid in the summer of 2021. If we fast forward only about 3 years, you can see projected costs for Mar Vista High School. It's nearly a 60% increase in total costs in that short amount of time. So some of the assumptions that we had made based on our experiences at Bonita Vista High School, we are actively honing in on those, reevaluating, getting new and updated information.
You said what percentage increase?
We're looking at about 60.
60?
60.
60.
And if you look at the cost.
Well, wait a minute, but the chart,
Bonita High cost us 19 million all in with soft costs and construction costs. Mar Vista High is projected at a little over 35 million total project costs.
wait a minute, I'm still not seeing the math here. I apologize. I'm looking at the chart and I'm reading it and I see a $3 million difference between the Bonita Vista projected construction and total project. Or is that projected or total project? Or is that both of those together? I'm sorry.
So the way you want to read the graph, I think it's kind of, I think the question is how to read the graph. So the blue line, the blue bar
Yeah.
is just the construction. The orange bar is construction and it includes, and it
okay.
includes
I'm
the,
sorry,
the
that
or,
wasn't
yeah,
clear
you were
to me.
looking, I saw what you were doing. So the orange one includes the design, so it's
Okay.
architect.
Fantastic.
Then
Thank
you compare, so that's a set of data. Then you compare that data set to the next one over, which Mar Vista High. If you look at the blue bar, that's construction, and that's the projected, because right now, obviously, that's
I'm
not
sorry.
complete. So
Thank
it's,
you for explaining.
so if you can see, the blue and the orange bar are Bonita's project. The following bar set of data set in Mar Vista High, those are separate and apart. So you can see the escalation
Yeah.
that has happened. But thank you for that point of clarification.
Yeah, I'm trying to just understand it clearly. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that clarity. So that's an important piece. That is an important piece for the conversation that we will continue to have today, because that percentage is something that we're experiencing across our
Across the
program.
board.
So really quickly, we wanted to also touch base and just do a refresh for our program funding. And so we have up here is a slide that shows you Proposition O, which has about $309 million remaining of the original 644. As a reminder for Prop O, the way that it staggers out for the issuance is it takes us to about 2047 in terms of when we would be able to access all of those funds. And so we look at ourselves at being able to do intervals of 25 to 35 million about every 24 to 36 months until we get to that endpoint. Measure DD, we got in a much faster portion, which is fantastic. So of the 403, part of the discussion that we have for today is the allocation and the distribution of the 198 that we received. And we anticipate one more issuance for that bond. And then we also have actively about $198 million in CFD projects or funds, with about 103 of them committed. And we have several other projects right on the heels of what we have going right now, and we will continue to draw that down. And then as a reminder for state facilities, we have fund for 35, and we have about $10 million, and that's the funds that when we did the district-wide HVAC and we submitted our state match applications, those are the funds that we've received back from the state of, yes.
Okay.
And then over on the right-hand side, we're tracking for the 23-24 school year about $5 million of general funds that will be available for use of capital program. So before we go all the way into the projects, we are going to jump out of this slide for a minute. And we want to take a moment to walk you through some of the tools that we use to develop our program. Because I think it's important to understand not just the fun stuff on the backside, but how we build to that, especially when we talk about that 60% range and the tools that we use to help kind of mitigate some of that and monitor some of that. So I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Brust, and he is going to walk you through our budget development worksheet.
So, thank you, Ms. Quirk. This document that you see here, don't worry, I will not go through every line of this Excel spreadsheet. I will spare you that, but just hit some of the highlights here of what components are included in this tool that these folks here use really on a daily basis to track the costs. So the first thing we do is we insert the budget for each one of the projects. And as you see in the highlighted yellow row along the top, there's various dates associated with that. So those dates are associated with phases of the project. So we start out with the preliminary budget. That's, hey, we're going into a project, it's been determined that this is a priority, and we set the budget there. As the project moves along, that budget may increase. It may decrease, depending on the scope, depending on some of the other challenges and factors that we talked about earlier. As we move down this document actually tracks all of we call them soft costs, those things that are associated with regulatory requirements, those things that are required for designers, for inspection services, pre-construction services, all of those type of costs. And if we continue to go down, then we get into what we call hard costs. Those are the actual construction dollars that are spent on the project to construct the project. Within those hard costs, we also provide allowances, contingencies for those things that we know that we don't know that are out there. The things
The
that,
known unknowns.
Yes, the known unknowns, exactly. So we try to account for those. And those things have changed as we move through the project. For example, on this particular sheet, we have construction contingency there. And we were able, because of the process and how we've moved along, to change that percentage there. We start out with usually a 10% construction contingency, and we've moved it to 5% as we've refined that.
But is that because we understand what the necessities are and becomes much more fixed to a number as we end up closing in on the cost, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly it. Yes, and then, so we have the construction contingency. The very bottom line there is the project contingency. So that's a contingency that we also set aside, and that varies based on the complexity of the project, but we can modify that so that we have dollars available for those things that may come up along the project. And then ultimately, those numbers are then all totaled at the bottom, and it reconciles what our current budget is in relation to our actual costs.
Right now, you'll notice that there's a lot of red on the bottom of that page, and that's because we have not actually fully funded the projects, and so that's part of our discussion for today, okay? So thank you for sharing that, Mr. Brust. The other things we wanted to show are a couple of other tools that we have out there that our team is utilizing right now or developing. So one of the things with the 4 projects that we'll talk about today that are non-stadium related is we've been spending time, specifically Ms. Catan, with our school site principals talking about their master schedule and their space utilization. And I know that's something you both understand as educators in terms of what that means, which is great in terms of us facilitating this conversation. And one of our objectives right now is that the work that we're doing is new construction, that we're not looking towards modernization. And one of the reasons why that is one of the issues that Mr. Brust brought up, and that is that DSA continues to instill new requirements. Well, they used to have a very, I would say, more lenient seismic assessment when you were doing modernization, and there was a formula, you would get credits for certain things. Well, they've made that much stricter. So the cost benefit for modernization versus new construction has completely shrunk in size. And so we are moving to new construction versus modernization. And so in doing that, one of our objectives is also to figure out what we refer to, it's not a technical term, classroom Jenga. So as we're doing work on campuses, how other things would move around. And so this is just a quick snapshot of what this looks like. And so currently this is Mar Vista Academy, and they have this pack of portable classrooms sitting on the north side of their campus. And our trajectory work that we've been doing with the principal over there actually shows us that those would go away by the time we finish the phase of work that we're recommending for them, because they have figured out how to redistribute into the main buildings on that campus those classrooms. And so this is something we're doing with all 4 of those campuses, and it's an important tool, and we'll continue this work. And this methodology will also translate into our master plan revisions that we'll also discuss in a little bit. Second to that, we have been talking about how we're doing our communication with our school sites in our respective communities. And so we have taken time to put together a different outline in a format, and I'm going to ask Mr. Brust to walk you through that a little bit so that we all have an understanding of the work of what we're doing and how we're doing it, because you both know well, right, we often receive feedback from our communities here and elsewhere, and so I think it's an important tool for us, and if there's anything that you see here that you would like us to take into consideration in terms of our approach, we are welcome to hearing that as well.
Thank you. So one of the priorities for the Planning and Construction Department is consistent, accurate communication with all stakeholders. And while obviously our focus is on the construction portion, we realize that we are here to support the educational process, and that is the focus. And so how we integrate with school sites, we really want to become a part of that community and work very closely with them. So we have received feedback in our conversations of what's important at school sites and how we can better provide information. So we have this draft document here that we've been working on, refining, to put together so that we have a clearly defined plan on a communication protocol when we go to a school site and we start to begin that conversation about construction projects. So in this example here, this process would be facilitated by the project manager, a few of which we have here with us this afternoon. And one of the first priorities is to establish that group of stakeholders. So we included in that list here the principal, assistant principals, staff members, students, and then we talk a little bit about some of the meeting structures and who would be involved in those meetings and how those would roll out. So we talk about meeting number 1. That's the idea of introducing the concept of the project, receiving feedback, putting together that team. How is that team going to be built? And there's variation depending on the campus, who would be involved, who would be the best people for that particular project to provide insight and feedback on. So then we would move to some of the programming elements that Ms. Quirk talked about is there going to be movement of classes on campus, how those movements would possibly affect the campus, and how we can help to facilitate that. Then we would move on to the presentation of the program, and that would be multiple meetings, and that would include staff, student, parent meetings. We recently had conversations with students about how they would use a space. For example, a quad. What are the things that are important? What activities take place in the quad? And then how we can involve the design team to meet some of those needs. Then we have project presentation to those same groups over a course of multiple meetings, and then continuing on with the project coordination, because once the project starts, there will have to be coordination with the site. Construction by its very nature can be a disruptive process on a campus, so we want to mitigate any disruption to the best of our abilities.
Thank you, Mr. Brust. So on that, we have one more thing we're going to show, and then we'll get into all the other pieces. So Janice Alcaraz, who's our project manager, who's working on our East Lake projects, we have a painting and flooring replacement project coming over there for the entire campus, in addition to a secondary project, which we'll share with you in a few minutes. There are a lot of logistics in that. and the communication of that is essential. And we don't believe that that's a responsibility that should lie solely on the administration, because they're really busy with a fleet of other things that are taking place. And so Ms. Alcaraz she's a jack of many trades, and she has taken the time to put together specifically, and this is going to become a model for us moving forward, a website specific to the work that's going to happen. She has, so it's how do you pack your classrooms, right? You think that's pretty basic for some folks, but for some, it's very overwhelming. And so we're still reviewing this draft, but it's kind of like what you're doing, what it's about, things for them to consider from the time period, because there's going to be a very rigid schedule that they'll be following. So they're 3 weeks out, they're 1 week out, they're 5 weeks out. What are the things that they can be doing to prepare for the packing and the movement of their classrooms? She has diagrams that she's included, useful tips for packing, and there's some parameters of things, but this is just kind of an example of some of the information that we look to be doing for some of our projects moving forward. And then she has links, and one of my favorite things here is once the staff does this questionnaire form right here, it basically asks them a series of questions. It loads to a Google Doc to her and to our construction management team, telling them that they're ready to go, et cetera. It's pretty cool. And then the other thing too is this FAQ that she's developed for frequently asked questions, right? So because this is not intuitive, and we don't expect it to be for our teachers while they're trying to do their instruction and prepare for a disruptive moment in the academic year. And so we are going to continue to talk about this. She says she can make these happen for all of our projects, so we can make them a little bit custom. So collectively, we'll be working on a standard template that we can use, and the PMs can then populate that information to her, and then she can help us facilitate those. So these are some of the tools that we use, and we're excited about some of this. I'm going to brag on the team a little bit because they've been pretty incredible.
And then this comes centralized back to you, so then you're able to kind of keep track and actually of all the materials,
Yes.
correct? And that's brilliant. And somebody compensate her, because she just saved you so many man hours by doing this, yes?
It saves a lot, and it helps with coordination and facilitation of information, not only for us, but for our construction management team and the school site. And additionally, this is a link that can be set for our staff to get to. It's information that parents might benefit from, so it can be placed on school site websites, and then obviously on our own as well.
And so I just wanted to add, I think for us, I really appreciate the innovation that our team's bringing. A lot of times we say, we try to identify best practices. I think our team is developing best practices. And so I just, these projects are complex. There's a lot of coordination that needs to happen. People don't understand some of the basic elements to construction projects. So the ability to be able to bring some more clarity, and, whether you want to look at it, in the evening or at your own leisure, this gives us the ability to have communication out there to clarify.
We went through this process at my college, from moving from one building to another as well, and nobody really told us purge until the very last minute, and then it was everybody purging at one time, and we didn't have enough carts. So it's just, I'm so appreciative of this. I don't think you understand. When we moved, it was literally getting rid of years worth of papers. So when I hear that, it's just like really, really reminds me of that time period. Thank you for this.
Sure. And we're aware of that, not just with moving of a classroom, but even athletic facilities or anything else that we're doing. It's personal in nature to folks, and everybody has a different barometer to how they move through those situations. And so the team is trying to provide the resources that are there, and there are some folks who are going to make it happen on their own, and there's others who we will help them pack.
Yep.
So that's where we are. Okay, so we are going to transition to projects. We're going to start with CFD. They're fairly easy and simple, and then we're going to migrate to our bond projects. And there's going to be a lot of visual information coming your way, and verbal information. And so we're going to walk through it slowly, and as we have questions, please raise your hand. So I am going to turn this over to Mr. Brust.
Thank you. The first project we're going to look at here, we've talked about already. It's the East Lake High School painting and flooring replacement project. It has a current construction value, so this is hearkening back a little bit to those difference between hard construction value, soft costs, and total project costs. This has estimated total project cost of just about $15,500,000. $500,000. So we're working right now. Architects are developing drawings. We're very close to finalizing those. And then this project is expected to start here in the fall of this year. Next, we also at Eastlake High School is the library modernization. So on the left-hand side of this slide is a plan view of the, we'll call it the left-hand side of the library building. Currently is being utilized for a lot of book storage, material storage, but it's going to be transitioned into some classrooms for some sports medicine classrooms. So we have those on the, we'll call it plan north side view here. Additionally, we've been working with architects to be able to incorporate a facility that's right adjacent to the softball and track and field stadium portion there that will allow students to, we call it a taping room, so we can have some services there. And then on the southern portion there of this plan view is some classrooms and hygiene rooms and life skills rooms for our special needs students. So those will be incorporated on that left-hand side of the building. On the right-hand side, we have a artist rendering of what the interior, an approximation at least, of what the interior of the new library space will be including. So a lot of that storage material that was previously on the left-hand side of the building is going to be moved and migrated over to new high-density storage, get some more efficiencies in the library portion, a little more accessible for the folks that deal with those materials, increasing efficiency there. Next, we have the new building project at Olympian High School. So this is a project that Ms. Alcaraz is working on. It's a 2-story classroom building with 12 classrooms. It's going to replace, it's to be located in an area where there are 3 portable classrooms currently. Those classrooms will be incorporated in this new building, as well as other classrooms from another part of the campus. On a separate portion of the campus, there are 6 portable classrooms that will be removed and replaced with the services within this building. This will house some sports medicine classrooms, also some science classrooms, and some general education classrooms. Additionally, another scope of this project, you see on the right-hand side of that, will be some new areas for students to congregate during lunchtime, during breaks, some new shade and hardscape is well included in this project.
Thank you. Before we move off of CFD projects, I also want to point out, they're not here, we don't have any images for you, but we are underway with contractors for Otay Ranch for the stadium to be, that finish the remediation process with the light pole that fell down via fire and then impacted our bleachers. And in addition, at Otay Ranch, all of the street light poles that within the campus themselves are rotting out at the bases, and so that project is also underway for replacement and kind of those. And then we are beginning the packaging of what I'm calling Rancho Del Rey deferred maintenance everything. Rancho Del Rey is rounding the corner towards 25 years old. They have their original roofs and mechanical units, which are aging and need to be replaced. And they have a series of other just odds and ends, and so our intention is to package everything together for efficiency and kind of go in and take care of the issues that are on that campus so we can expend our energies elsewhere after we complete that work. So you'll see and hear more of that coming as we move forward. Okay, so here we go. We're going to transition into our bond projects, and the first one up is there's images for each one of these campuses, so we're going to move them through them fairly quickly. Again, we've put in the construction, the hard construction costs, the soft costs, and the total project costs. You're starting to really see, and I really want to stress, the scope of the work that we're doing on these stadiums is in kind to what we just installed at Bonita. So there's not more square footage in the buildings. There's nothing. It is the same amenities that we just built at Bonita. And so you see that it's the track and field. We're maintaining the 2,000 bleacher capacity. I'll touch base really quickly on a special thing for a castle that nobody else has because of their unique facility. But restrooms, concessions, the Musco lighting, the sound systems, the press box, the field storage buildings. But this is a snapshot. Most of the campuses look exactly the same. We've been working extensively on the layouts, et cetera. And for Castle Park, I do want to just share, it's really hard to see, and I don't have a laser, but you see the bleachers on the home side, and all the way at the top, kind of on the slope of the hill, you see a little bit of green. Well, where their existing bleachers are is actually a retaining wall, and that has to come down because it's not compliant for us anymore.
It's geographically or topographically something completely different that you have to reconstruct in order to make the stadium.
Correct. And so in terms of staying for Castle Park with the 2,000 bleachers that everybody else is receiving moving forward, and they're actually putting 1,700 home bleachers on their side because we are letting the sites decide how they want that 2,000 broken down. But what that is we're calling it, I'm starting to call it parks or terraces at the park. And so it's actually an extension of a retaining wall. We're putting it with a flat level. So you can bring your lounge chair or towels or whatever else and kids can play, but you can also sit, and it is an extension of their bleachers. So I'm just going to click through these images, and I am going to ask Mr. Brust to share quickly some of the preemptive work that Mr. Murillo has been doing extensively in preparation of these projects. But visually, they're the same. They're personalized. And is there any general questions about the stadium projects, not some of the other things we're going to get into in themselves right now?
Now, why can't we go to Costco and pick them all up for a bulk pack and then divide them all up in the district, right? I wish that we were able to do that, right?
Yeah, definitely. And we are, Mr. Murillo is been working very diligently, as is the entire team, the design team, on trying to get as much preliminary information as possible. So there's been a lot of work done with geotechnical studies, utility surveys, civil surveys, hazardous materials investigation. There are literally crews out there digging holes in the ground to physically identify utilities that are underground that, I'm sure that, as is true in many scenarios, the drawings from many years ago, a lot of things have the possibility of having been changed over the years. So we want to actually verify those. And the reason that we do that is so that we remove any of as much as we can, the risk of things coming up during construction. It's a lot easier to design and plan for those now as opposed to once construction starts. So we've also been looking at, we talked a little bit about the idea of purging and cleaning out and organizing things. So a lot of effort's been happening on that front as well, looking at what materials are currently being stored at sites, how they can be reallocated, and how they can be made more efficient. So.
Okay, so we're going to keep going. And I think I went the wrong way. Did I go the wrong way? There we go. Okay, so as a reminder, for Measure DD, we have roughly $198 million. Plus, we got another $50 million for PREPO. So when we identified the projects that we took forward when the issuance occurred, it was for the 4 stadiums, and then we identified 4 campuses for new building and site improvement projects. And as we've been discussing, there's obviously this exponential increase in costs. And so what we're presenting to you today are Package A is reflective of the original, the funds that were originally project scope that we were targeting for each of the campuses. And then Package B is if we took the opportunity to take into consideration how we would do some distribution of the funds in a different manner. And so Castle Park, for example, is Package A. We very confidently thought we were going to be building a 2-story classroom building from the go over at Castle Park. And no matter how many times we tried to ask a different question or pressed our architects or anything else, that their response didn't change. And we put them through it for quite a while. So Package A for Castle Park High School would be roughly a 10,000 square foot building, replacement in kind of their existing buildings that are right in this location on their campus, and then a quad improvements. For the quad, we're reciting a building in the middle of the campus, and we have to run the utilities. There's no way for us to do that work without us having to tend to that quad and put it back in even better condition than it currently exists. All the while honoring, they have over here on the left side, they have their senior lawn. It's a very special space on that campus, and it is absolutely being designed to maintain the integrity of that location and maybe even come with some improvements. And then for Package B, you can start to see, right? So the project total is roughly $10 million more dollars. It becomes an 18,000 square foot building, 2-story, taking us back to where we originally thought we were going to be able to start. It's 8 standard classrooms and then maintaining the replacement in kind of the Art ASB, a mod severe suite. Their counseling offices and school psychologists, in addition to their quad improvements. Any questions for Castle Park? Okay, here I go. Bonita Vista High School. So Bonita's been a challenge, and it's a challenge because it's one of our older campuses, and it's a unique layout on a very compressed site, actually. And then the amenities and how they're laid out and distributed on that campus create a challenge because there's not an easy, oh, we can put it here, or we can take these out and replace it in kind, because going back to what I shared with you with the work that Ms. Catan's been doing, what is the domino effect and the ripple effect of movement? Because there's not always an easy answer. And so we originally were thinking where building M is, great, we're gonna knock that thing out, we're gonna put a brand new jewel in the front of that campus, with the idea of pulling their student services together into one building rather than having them spread out throughout campus and a bank of classrooms upstairs. We can't get there. Also, there's significant elevation changes and other things that are happening. So we walked, I think between myself, Mr. Bruss and Ms. Catan, we probably put in 40 hours of walking that campus and really trying to bend our brains and open it in a different capacity with our architects and with the administration. So currently where we're headed right now, and going back to the sheet that Mr. Bruss was sharing about our process with staff, we be at the beginning phase of that. But we are migrating from the original scope of being able to afford about a 13,000 square foot building, give or take a little bit, and quad improvements to 16,000 square feet. And you can actually see where we've decided what makes sense in terms of where to site that building. And it's right next to our stadium. Because as we continue to look at that campus, it just became the obvious point of where to continue improving the site aesthetics and the feel of the campus, is to site a new building.
So you're basically putting things on the side of the stadium there to be able to hold, and then whatever continuing improvements we make, we can actually take that out and hold that up. That'll be basically the fort that you build everything around.
We would, and actually you can see it really well because then on these images I was able to maintain like leaving most of the campus up there. So if we were to go site that building right next to the stadium, it continues to expand that new beautiful visual that you have of the campus, but then it leaves us open for flex about how we would in our future phases on that campus figure out how to take those other buildings, because a lot of their main services flank around that corner from H Street to Otay Lakes.
Right.
And so there's a synergy there that we know we can make happen, but make it make sense and not like we're shoehorning something in. And that's,
we have to remember, this is probably the first real building of a project with sprawl in mind, and
Yes.
then that was the aesthetic of the time period. Just create sprawl, and
Right.
we have so much land behind us, we don't have anything to worry about. And then now when sprawl is gone and we have to sit there, it's like cleaning up the mess afterwards.
well, and one of the things too, with regards to this campus is when we look at the long-term trajectory for enrollment, it's one of the things that stays fairly static. Even as our enrollment will, the forecast is for the decline that we're starting to see. So we have work to do here. There's been a lot of discussion with site administration around a CTE-focused building. And so the range of classrooms we did not indicate here because we do have work to occur with that campus. But it's either going to be CTE focused and or a combination of, and so that the classroom numbers would fluctuate. What you can see on this is for package A, we literally would be building a 13,000 square foot building with a little bit of quad improvements, but there's also 2 weird modular buildings in the middle of their quad, which we would not be in the position to relocate or move. They would remain. In package B, that allows us to actually take the dance room would get incorporated to the new building, therefore pulling that out of the quad, creating more opportunity and space. And then in addition, the girls' locker room facility, there's a secondary facility on that campus, also is placed in the middle of the quad, and we would site that on a better location. So those things are also included with package B for Bonita. Any questions?
No, I'm just very interested to see how it lays out and long term. I mean, I'm getting on my soapbox again. I'm sorry. Bonita Vista has been one of the places that we haven't done anything at, and other than the stadium, and for a very long time. And I catch a lot of flack for that, right? And rightfully so, I think, right? I think that, the performance building, Bowles Theater needs, we can't, the place that's winning most awards on campus, not in a bad way, it needs to be expanded. And I know that may not happen in this iteration, but that's the long-term vision that we should be having and as well. Those are the things that my constituents come and talk to me about, not talk to me, complain to me about. And I want to be very aware about and very intentional in the way that we approach this, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that what you just said reflects the tenor of the conversations we're having. What really interrupted this process was when we hit the financial, situation in 2018. That really it was an interruption. And so now the work that the team is doing is first and foremost with this bond sale, but then really the work around longer term plan. So the community can see, oh, okay, so that's what's going to happen in 2025. That'll happen in 2028. But right now, because of that interruption, it really caused us to, in essence, hit a reset, and that's what the team is in the middle. As you can see, we're in the middle of that process to revamp the longer term plan.
And I thank you, Ms. Perk, for doing this, because I know you've been working hard, and I know, Ms. West, you've been working hard on this. The whole crew's been working hard, and I appreciate that the way that you're laying it out. This is the reason that we're going to go this way, to be able to hold classes like the Jenga we're talking about. We just can't pull everything out and just knock everything down, and that gives folks the idea. Okay, this is a long-term project that we're going to continue moving forward with, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Mar Vista Academy. This campus for Package A, our original, again, we thought we were going to be able to do more than we could, but what it would settle at is this campus has a strong need for an events space, and so it's a combination. The building that has all the dots, those are tables, that we're calling it an events building. It's not a full MPR per se, but more of an event space that would have indoor-outdoor opportunity, hard lid outside so they can feel like they're still indoors, even if the doors are open, because not everybody's going to fit inside, but to provide an opportunity for there to have larger events. And then while we tried, we couldn't get there. One of the campuses or the challenges at Mar Vista is the orientation of their campus. It has no front door, right? So the parking lots have no association to their administration building. It's a little bit backwards. And so what we are looking to turn that around, and I don't remember the name of the street that we would be orienting that on, but the parking lot that's on the south side of their campus, we would demolish that building that sits right next to that and build a new building for Package A that would include their counseling office, so their student services is still separated from each other, but with a Mod Severe suite, which is a big trigger point for that campus to get rid of the portables in the back. But if we move to Package B, it allows us to, and you can see the difference in the level of detail between the two images on the right-hand side, to consolidate student services together, so counseling and their administration facility are together, still maintaining the Mod Severe suite and the event center, and giving them a new front door for student drop-off, student access, et cetera, for the community. The resources that they have in that existing building that we would demolish would move over into the administration building because it's their community resource center and things like that, which is still great, some of their after-school programs, because then it provides them exterior street access as well, which is also a control point for after-hours, weekend event, et cetera. Questions? And last but not least, Granger. This one, I love this campus. We have had a lot of conversation at Granger over the years. I have personally. I've been in lots of discussion with that staff. And we met with them again a few months back. And the design team that we've been working with, they really kind of have been pushing themselves to learn us. They're newer to us in nature and to learn this campus. And so it's a little funny, but when we met with this campus, if you asked, I think, most of that staff, what's the one thing you need if you could have nothing else? You can see right there where the finger buildings go. I'm going to call them the 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. And then there's that bank of green that we now have behind that. There's an area behind that campus which doesn't have a full ADA because the ADA access path of travel is actually on the other side of those buildings. Across the board, they were like, that needs to be redone. And so that was, and you see this reflected in any of the images that you see above us, that we would be addressing that situation, the drainage, and then creating a proper connectivity to their library, which has like, I think 3 or 4 different layers of fencing as a barrier from the main campus to the library. So addressing that issue. But then when we got to Granger, then it really becomes very different what their need is. Over on the right-hand side of the campus, on the other side of the cafeteria, they have an art and band classroom. So students are leaving what I would consider the main academic instructional side of the house and moving through some operational things into a couple of other buildings. And so we really wanted to make that an objective that students were all staying over towards the main part of the campus, and then we would repurpose those other buildings for things that were more operational or custodial in nature, in alignment with what they would be better suited for. So, but in order to do that, we couldn't afford with package A two different, like to do everything. But their split becomes, hey, we too, like Mar Vista, we need an event space for our community and for our students. So that's what the option 1 on the top of the page is. It's an event space with band and art, and they're nestled in right there next to the library, kind of folding everybody in together, therefore reducing and eliminating any students from having to go over to the other side of campus. Option B, or 2, would be a new physical education PE facility, which if you've seen their locker rooms, and I know Mr. Solis that you have, those are well overdue. And then a little bit of quad improvement. So we have not taken these entirely back to the campus yet. We were waiting, and then some other things started to come up. And so, but this is the work that we've done. And our next step with them would be to choose which one of the 2 options in option A we would proceed with. Or there's package B, which I think you can see it is a representation of those 2 elements mixed together, creating a larger quad space. We also, their other issue on this campus is that where the pinky beige is the DG dirt over there, and it's been expressed to us that when they have done previous construction on that campus, they actually put all of the construction debris in the DG, and so after rain, they are still, years and years later, have nails coming up, glass, other debris, which is, so we would be scraping all of that out and putting in a new DG location for them, in addition to improvements to their outside grass area. So, and then hitting all over ADA, and then again, having no other classrooms over on the other side. So that takes us through the projects. Next, we're going to talk about schedule.
That's
and there's
microfine print right there, yeah.
it is, and so we're going to walk you through this one, and it's really more of a conceptual conversation. We went through this exercise so that we could understand it in terms of what it meant. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bruss, but essentially what this is 3 different sets of schedule, and they're color-coded still. The gold is still reflective of package A options. The blue is package B options, and then the green is just reflective of kind of projects in general for the other ones we just talked about. So I'm going to give it to Mr. Bruss.
I'm starting to notice a pattern here with the very complex, small slides. I drew that straw. So once again, I will not go through every single line here, but it's just a general overview, like Ms. Quirk mentioned. The gold is reflective of the package A schedule. And what it is, we talked a little bit about the timing of construction projects. And this scenario has the 4 stadiums laid out so that they bid in sequential order with a very small amount of time. Well, relatively, everything's relative, right? Relatively small amount of delay between bidding times, about 3 months or so, just so that we don't completely saturate the market. We give some space, subcontractors can organize their work, and we can move forward in that direction. The blue section shows the schedule with the 3 stadium projects. That would be, oh boy, I'd have to, Castle Park, Chula Vista, and Mar Vista. Okay, that passed the test, all right. Proceeding with that same schedule as the gold, but the bidding for Southwest taking place about 12 months later as opposed to the 3 months. And what that does, you'll notice the 3 vertical lines in red on that schedule. Those are indicative of the time since the previous issuance of Measure DD. So we had an initial issuance in September of '22 for Measure DD. The second issuance could be at 24 months, 36 months, or 48 months. So by manipulating the schedule, projects may fall in within different issuances. So I think that is the topic for discussion today.
So what that does is takes us here. And it's for us to have a discussion about our, thank you, by the way, Mr. Brust, for our May board meeting and what that recommendation would look like for the CIP. So all of the work that we do, right, is attached to our CIP. And so we've kind of restated everything that we've shared here. So on the left, fund package A is an option. And just to restate what that means, it would be to proceed with the design and construction of the 4 stadium projects. To maintain the original budget and scope for the 4 new building and site improvement projects. And at the May board meeting, what that CIP would look like is to provide project funding for design and construction for the 4 stadium projects, and then provide funding for the 4 new building improvement projects at the package A funding level. Or package B is that we would proceed with design and construction of 3 stadium projects and complete the design of the Southwest High Stadium after the second issuance of Measure DD. And what that does is opens up roughly $30 million, it's closer to 35, which would then be distributed amongst those 4 new building and site improvement site improvement projects. And then which would allow us to have a more comprehensive scope to those projects. And what the May CIP would look like would be project funding for design and construction at Castle Park High, Mar Vista High, and Chula Vista High Stadium, to provide additional funding to complete the design for Southwest, which they already have a million or so, I think, on the CIP. We would be adding about another $1 million to that so we can get them shelf ready. And then lastly is to provide project funding for the 4 new building and site improvement projects with the package B funding levels that were reflected in the discussion that we've had today. So we want to open it up and get some feedback and some guidance in terms of what you would like to see us do moving forward.
I have to be selfish for the area I'm representing. I'd much rather see package B, right? But and I'm being selfish in the best of ways to try and represent my area more. But what I do find interesting is, and that's what I was just asking the superintendent Aguirre right now, is, well, I mean, by the time we're in 4 years out, right? I mean, there may be another issuance of bonds or whatever that may be able to be feathered back in and continue the projects that we want to continue. Correct?
So and that's a great point. So, and we've talked about this. So we gave you our ideal construction schedules.
Yeah.
When was the last time we saw those happen, right?
Right.
So the likelihood of any of those schedules sliding to the left
No.
is probably not happening.
No.
Most things are going to slide to the right, whether it be when we are able to get them out of DSA, bid them. We have to track what's happening in the market where we think, oh, a 3-month interval for bidding is going to make sense. We may get to a point where we say that doesn't make sense. We're going to wait 6 because of XYZ. There's also motivation to get on the street because we're hearing where electrical panels used to take maybe 12 weeks. It's taking 80 weeks, 80. Yeah. Right, so there's puts and takes to all of this, and there's not a solid. And then going back to what Mr. Brust had shared about those 24, 36, and 48 vertical lines, one of the things that myself, Dr. Geary, Dr. Salkelt will be tracking is when will the district be in a position to go back to the market for that second issuance. Exactly. So it could be anywhere between that 24 to 48. And we're already having the discussion of, okay, if there's a savings from a project here, it's going to this budget over here. Yeah. And we're already starting to identify where we could pick up nickels and dimes for that so we can get there faster.
And not in a bad way. I mean, I've heard about masonry work and how cement over the last, like, literally 3 months has jumped into price, like tripled in price, and you're waiting 6 months to be able to get the cement to wherever you need, any kind of project. Can I be just hopeful that maybe the markets will at one point in the future stabilize and perhaps come down? I mean, and that's the other thing about the length of the project, right? That there should be, the further out that we go, we should hit a baseline that we can kind of establish with ourselves with regards to calendars and with regards to prices, right? And that helps us to be conservative as well, but that those savings should come.
They should, but one of the things that unfortunately we don't typically see is construction costs drop too much. So what was it in 08, 09 when things got really bad? Things just shot through the roof, and we did see a slight softening. And then things held for quite some time. And then with COVID, everything's just kind of broken open in a whole different direction. And then there's just where we thought, oh, we're starting to get on the other side of that. We're not, because we're starting to see really inconsistent patterns with manufacturing and lead times and materials and things like that. And so what we're hopeful for, because we have that same level of optimism, is that there will be softening in some areas on some of the price points. But what we know is happening is, because the market is abundant right now out there with construction, especially in the San Diego market, is that there's lots of costs being just like added in on bid day and things like that, which is what continues to create some of our volatility. And so that's where I think that if there's some shifting that happens with the economy in this next year, we might see folks getting to get a little bit more conservative in their approach, which would be to our benefit. We're not seeing that or realizing that in its entirety yet, so we'll see.
Thank you. You answered my question as best as I wanted to answer. Thank you so much.
So I'm gonna take you back to this and see if there's any other thoughts or comments.
Oh, yeah, I do have a comment. Thank you for your comments. And I don't look at it as selfish. I think I see it as, I think we're gonna get more bang for our buck if we go with package B, because I think it's the kids are gonna get a lot more. And I think if we rush and try to do package A, which would be great, because they'll get something nice, but they won't get as much as they would if we go to package B. So I'm comfortable with package B.
Right, and thank you for saying that, because I forgot, I left with you up there this sheet right here, and it's a summary of all of the projects, just for, it's kind of like a quick reference guide, right? So the difference between package A and package B is about 20,000 square foot of building that we would be providing to students. And it's just a quick snapshot reminding you, so we weren't sliding all over the place with slides, of the square footage difference, the classroom differences, and some of the elements that would be associated to those projects.
Well, and this goes counter to the narrative that I hear sometimes, that, we're going away from the master plan and that we're not really focusing on classrooms and everything. I'm like, wait a minute, that's the 62,400. And this is something that we are very much taking into account. And so I kind of wanted to put that out there and make sure that everybody that's live streaming it sees that this is something that's really important with regards to how we're approaching this next bond issuance and how we're working with construction.
So I just wanted to take us down a brief trip down memory lane. So you saw how much Bonita Vista's track and field cost, about $19 million. At that cost, we anticipated some inflation. Nowhere did anybody anticipate the level of inflationary pressures we've all seen. So for track and field stadiums were perfectly reasonable based on that assumption. Nobody anticipated a nearly 60% inflation in cost. So that then caused our team to continue to refine, reflect, discuss, and continue to co-construct the plan. And so I didn't want to lose that piece, because when that concept came together, it was fairly reasonable. Again, the inflationary pressures that we have seen, whether it's labor or materials, it's both actually, have really caused us to reflect. And so as we're thinking, how do we get the most bang for our buck, the best value for the dollar for the investment, it really caused a refocusing, a re-evaluating, and that's where you see that package B come together, so that we can get as deep as possible on campuses. We would not give up any one particular track and field. It would just be, in essence, move to the next bond issuance. And I also want to just briefly touch on that, because I think for purposes of our public, there's a difference between a bond authorization, which is when the voters vote on a bond, and a bond issuance was when we actually go to the market to New York or San Francisco and investors buy your bonds. So bond authorization, just for a brief reminder, Proposition DD authorized us up to $403 million in bonds to be able to sell those. You can't sell those immediately because there are limits based on our assessed valuation. The government has a system of checks and balances where the treasurer tax collector on an annual basis, usually in the summer, sends to us a report and says, this is how much you can sell based on your assessed valuation. That's the assessed valuation on real property, whether commercial or residential within our boundaries. So that's the bond authorization, is the voters vote on it. In essence, we present the voters our thoughts on construction, and then they say yes or no. So to this point, we've expended approximately half of Prop DD, and so we still have approximately $200 million left. Bond issuance is once we receive that report on an annual basis from the treasurer tax collector, they say, hey, based, the real estate property went up in your district, so therefore you have the ability to issue X amount. So those are two topics that sometimes get confused. We have the ability to issue bonds, but at the same time, we want to make sure we're presenting and providing evidence to our voters, our taxpayers, that we are delivering on these. So if you look at what we delivered on the track and field at Bonita. That stadium is a beautiful stadium, one of the first major investments we've made on that campus in a long time. We've delivered on the swimming pool, the aquatics project at Imperial Beach, at Mar Vista and Imperial Beach. That is another project that, again, delivered for our students. If you look at the classroom modernization project at Hilltop Middle, again, we wanted to make sure there's a body of work and body of evidence to support us going back to the voters to let them know, look, this is what we're able to do when we have the appropriate resources. So that's bond authorization. For me, again, just this brief trip down memory lane, what we've been doing in the recent past and why we're confident in moving forward, and why we reconsidered kind of what had previously been our concept that had come to the board in terms of those track and fields. It was a reasonable plan at the time. Again, inflation then happens, and it causes us, as a learning organization, we reconsider, reevaluate, and adjust to reflect the realities on the ground. And so that's why we're bringing this forward, again, to be able to get that bang for buck. I just wanted to say that because context matters.
Totally.
And as we move forward, again, continuing to build those projects as more comprehensive and with the best value for our district.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Dr. Aguirre, because I forgot to mention, I appreciate all the work that
Yeah.
you guys all put into this.
This is
It-
thorough,
Yeah,
very, very thorough.
so thank you.
Okay, so to recap, thank you, Dr. Aguirre. That was a great outline of the issuances versus the authorization. So to recap, am I hearing that the recommendation that you would like staff to bring forward in May, at the May CIP, would be for us to proceed with package B?
Package B, yes.
Okay. Excellent. And then we have one last slide. So just kind of going back, we've kind of been touching on some of these things, right? So you just mentioned, Dr. Arancibia, about the master plan. And so we've been talking about this a lot because as a facilities division, theoretically, your master plan should be updated about every 5 years. And the master plans, it's a conversation, right? But really, it's we are due. There's a lot of change that's happened in our district since we did the master plan in 2018, and where our district is headed as we move forward, while we are analyzing our enrollment and the things that are to come. So we will be putting that together. You'll see that coming forward probably from in the June board meeting for us to get our consultant in place so we can begin that work. And I think that it's really important to talk about what the master plan really is. The master plan is not what will happen, it's what can happen. And it's a moment in time for us to validate where we are, what program looks like, what costs look like, and so that we can formulate what our long-term plan is. And our goal, and it's kind of all on here, is that our district has been at a place where there's infusions of money that come at a limited time. And so when it happens, then then everybody we want to try to distribute that as much as we can. And so our goal is that we start making movements that continue to put us in a proactive position so that all of us understand collectively what the vision is, what the funds are, what the allocations are, and when and the order is that projects will occur on campuses. Yes. Because then we're all moving in the same direction together.
And I do believe it's going back to the context, that did not happen in the past iterations of bonds. We focused all of our energies on one particular campus or another particular campus, and we went kind of like in a step process, but then everybody's sitting on the sidelines going, hey, well, what happens to us? And that's why I really appreciate the way that you're approaching this, because there's nobody left hungry at the table. That's very important to me in the way that we approach this.
And so part of that is the story that we tell, right? And so that's the work that we will be putting together this year, is going back and figuring out, and there's some very obvious paths in that of where we've been and what that means in terms of where we stand today, right? And then really having that conversation about the work that has occurred on campuses, and because it does tell us a little bit about where our next steps are, and creating kind of what we would consider to be an equitable starting place. And so that we can start to tell that story, and we make those decisions together. And it's really just an ongoing conversation.
Absolutely.
And then more importantly, how we, and this is a task that Jason and I really need to delve into. Master plans are good because they're a great resource and a tool, but sometimes the intention of them gets very lost, and then folks consider that to be promises uncommitted.
Yeah.
And so that's the part of the conversation that we really want to be shifting. And I think a part of that has to do with education about how we do the work and why we do the work and what the intention of the work is. And so it's a great opportunity for us on all levels, up and down and left and right, to be doing that work together. And so that's part of what we're formulating.
Yeah, master plans really are a ceiling, not a floor. That's everything that is possible, that not necessarily everything that the funding will allow. Because at the end of the day, there's the funding, there's the inflationary, there's the cost of material, there's the labor, there's all these things that come into play. But our job to do it comprehensively is to be as comprehensive as possible. We just want to make sure we address the expectations so that there's not a confusion, and then there's a belief that that's going to be everything that happens, because that's contingent on many variables that are outside of our control.
Excellent work. This is excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a couple other real quick things. One, we have an open project manager position that we're hoping to fill sometime in the next several weeks. We're hoping we have enough candidates that we can do an interview pool and fill the vacant position that we've had open for quite some time. So we're looking forward to that. We have submitted funding applications for upwards of $20 million for the work done at East Lake High School, Bonita Vista, and for the Mar Vista Aquatics facility. Remember last month we had that resolution where we basically said, hey, yeah, state, we understand that there's no money, but we're in queue for that. We just got our receipt letters from CDE today that they have us. We're on our way for that. And so as soon as there's another state bond, we will be getting those funds probably in fairly short order, which is great. The CBOC, we are in a very transitional space with the CBOC right now. We have 2 open positions. We've had 1 resignation, and we have 3 other positions that are open actually because their terms are done at the end of June. And so we are going to be putting out a substantial advertisement for CBOC positions in the next, and we're hoping to have those at the June board meeting so everybody's new positions are in place as we move into the new fiscal year. And then the last one is 7-Eleven committee. We have that in place. I have the report on the appraisals that we had done several months ago, and I'm getting organized with myself so Dr. Gary and I can sit down and we can begin the conversation of where we see that going as for next steps and when we would convene the 7-Eleven committee. So that's it. Any questions?
So with that, I think we're at the roundtable component of our meeting. Is there any roundtable from any of the trustees or any of the staff present?
I think it's better than roundtable. This is an ongoing dialogue, and that's the way that we want to be able to function as a committee and a subcommittee, I should say, and as a community. I mean, I really appreciate working with you, Ms. Quirk and Mr. Brest. I think, and everyone here, Armando too. It's just this. This helps explain stuff so that nobody gets lost in the weeds and trying to look up documents in a good way, that we're being transparent, we're offering kind of commentary and why, and I think I'm just thankful to be among you and working with you. Thank you so much.
All right, so with that, I believe we are adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.